I'm Sari.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Welcome back to Seamwork Radio, where we share practical ideas for building a creative process so you can sew with intention and joy. Today, we're talking about how to match your sewing projects to your mood and your energy level. So we're going to cover why it's so important to have different types of projects ready to go, how to organize your project list so you can easily choose what to work on, and 10 practical tips for keeping sewing enjoyable no matter what kind of day you're having. All right, let's start off with our icebreaker. So, Haley, tell me about a time when you started a sewing project and immediately regretted it because you just weren't in the right headspace.
This actually happened to me this weekend. I had like an hour and a half to sew, and I've really been wanting to make, this is like so granny, but I don't care. I've been wanting to make a cover for a tissue box.
I just did that.
Really?
Yes.
We're on the same like frequency here.
I just did that.
So I was like, this is easy, right? And like it is, but I was like, I'll just like wing it. And so I like brought my tissue box into my sewing room, and I just like didn't have a clear concept of like how I wanted it to come together. All I had in mind was the fabric, and I started drafting it, and then like halfway through, I didn't like the approach I was taking, and I don't know why. I was being really stubborn. I didn't want to look at a screen.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a thing, I'm trying to do less screens. I'm like, I'm just going to wing it. It'll be great.
Yeah.
I didn't look up any like reference pictures or patterns or tutorials. And I was just like not in the mental space to like do a puzzle, however simple the puzzle was. And I ended up just like aborting mission an hour in after like working through like 2 iterations that I was unhappy with. And yeah, I just think I was like I was taking my allotted time into consideration, but I was not taking like my mental bandwidth into consideration.
Yeah. That sucks because you're like, this should be easy. And you start questioning yourself. You're like, why is this hard right now?
Because I was going in blind.
Yeah.
Like so silly of me. But sometimes we get cocky like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's funny that you made that because I did that. I got so sick of looking at the ugly tissue box on the back of our toilet.
They're so ugly.
Yeah.
Mine's my bathroom tissue box too. I was like, this does not fit the vibe.
Yeah.
We need something. We can do better.
It's a fun way to use scraps too.
Yes.
Yeah. That's funny. For me, I mean, this happens to me all the time. I have something in mind that I'm supposed to be working on, or that it's the next thing that I'm going to work on, but I just don't feel like that particular thing. We just came back. We're recording this in January, so we came back from a holiday break fairly recently, and I was going to finish my my quilt over the holiday break, but I had these other sewing projects that I really wanted to get ahead on because some of them I'm filming for YouTube, and I just wanted to kind of like get ahead, but I really didn't feel like it. I really could not get myself to be in the mood for it. And so I just went with it, and I just put those aside and was like, well, I'm just going to take a full 2 weeks off and not think about this at all. And it was the best decision because I really felt like it was a full break, even though I love sewing and it doesn't feel like work when I'm doing it usually. I just, at that moment, it felt like work. So I wasn't gonna let it feel like work.
I like how you listen to your intuition on it instead of fighting it like I did.
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. So if you have an icebreaker for us for a future episode, you can leave a question for us in a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and we'll answer it in a future episode. You can also leave it on Spotify. So I will check those as well. So if you have a question you want to leave on Spotify, if you're a Spotify user, that would be awesome too. I've been reading a lot of comments on Spotify. They're really, really nice. We've been getting a lot of good ones. All right. So you know that feeling when you've had a long day and you finally have some time to sew, but you just can't. You can't get in the mood. Maybe you're tired, or your brain feels scattered, or you're just not in the mood to make decisions. That's a big one for me. I get kind of decision fatigue at the end of the day. And it's so much easier in those moments to just zone out on the couch, watch TV, scroll through your phone, all those kinds of things that we do to just kind of zone out and not think. But here's what I've noticed. Those activities, they really just pass the time and they don't actually feel like they're replenishing you. Sewing, on the other hand, has this amazing ability to give me energy back, even when I start out feeling depleted. And I think the key here is just matching what I'm sewing to how I'm actually feeling in that moment. And if I try to kind of force myself to do something that's technically challenging when I'm exhausted, I just end up really frustrated and I make mistakes that I then regret later. But if I choose something that fits my mood, I can actually leave my sewing room feeling better than when I walked in. So today we're going to talk about how to set yourself up for that kind of success by planning ahead and creating options for whatever mood happens to strike at that time. So, Haley, do you find that your mood really affects what you want to work on generally?
Yeah, 100%. I think
Yeah.
that's something that I've really had to come to terms with in the last half decade of my life, as I'm just in a very busy season, coming to terms with the kind of sewing that is accessible to me if I want to continue my sewing practice in this season. And do it in a way that doesn't feel like a chore, right?
Yeah, I think that's really key.
What about you?
I definitely feel that way. I go through different periods, and sometimes that's a lot of what we're talking about today, but I feel like sometimes I really feel like working on things that are more complex, and sometimes I just can't handle that. And also kind of not just what I want to work on, but how I want to work on it. Do I want to um, work in large increments or small increments? Do I want to have music? Do I want to listen to a podcast or even watch a TV show sometimes when I'm cutting or something like that? So all of that kind of stuff are things I think about when it comes to my mood in the moment.
Do you think most sewists struggle with this, knowing what to work on based on how they feel?
Yeah, I think a lot of us get into kind of I think this is probably generally true and not just for sewists or not just about sewing, but we get into the habit of thinking about what we should be doing at any given time instead of what feels right or, what's natural to work on at that particular moment or to do at that particular moment.
Yeah. I think sometimes that we can get in these, as sewists, as creative people, we can get really wrapped up in the finished result, which I'm not saying that you should divorce your self from that entirely, but when it's our primary focus when we're selecting a project, I think a lot of times we can set ourselves up for some disappointment, in the realm of how it turns out versus our vision of it. Prioritizing the object over the experience, all of these things. I think that it's healthy to consider the finished product. You want to be able to love it and enjoy it, but also consider the rest of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's so true for so many things in life too. Just enjoying the moment that you're in versus always looking towards the future. I think I read this Thich Nhat Hanh quote recently, and he talks a lot about doing the dishes and about if you just stop and look at what you're doing at the moment with the warm water and the suds and what you're actually doing with your hands, then it's actually something that can be quite enjoyable instead of always thinking about, well, I need to, make lunch after this. And then what's the next thing after that? And while you're doing it, you're always thinking about the next thing that needs to happen. And there's a real difference in experience when you do that.
Yeah, totally. When you're having a really low energy day, what do you find yourself gravitating towards more? Do you sew at all, or do you do something else entirely?
Sometimes I sew or I like to cut when I'm feeling really low energy because I think it is very repetitive. To me, it's easy. Some people don't like it because it's tedious, but I like things that are a little bit tedious when I'm feeling low energy because I can just not use my mind so much and just let my hands do the work.
Yeah.
And I can, listen to music or do something else at the same time if I feel like doing that. But I think that's something that I feel like really helps me when I'm feeling like I don't have a lot of energy. What about you?
I like that mindset around cutting. I need to adopt that more. For me, I sometimes I sew, sometimes I don't. And what I tend to consider in these situations are what are my barriers to sewing in that moment. So, if my barriers feel like too great, like, oh, I need to like completely my sewing table and my cutting table are one and the same. So if I'm like, I have to clear everything off so I can cut my next
Yeah.
project and I don't even really know what I want to make next. Um, those are days that I tend to focus instead on, okay, well, what barriers can I remove for myself so that I can sew next
Hmm.
time? So I'll like clean up my space or maybe like refresh my sewing queue a little bit. So something that's like adjacent,
Yeah.
but not like the act of physically creating something.
Yeah. Yeah. I will do that too. Just spend 15 minutes cleaning up between projects, that sort of thing, I think is
Hmm.
nice little break in a way.
Yeah.
Especially because my sewing space is outside of my house. It's in a
Hmm.
shed in my backyard. And so it's like going somewhere else and just taking a break from life for a minute and then coming back.
Totally. And I will say that when I have even no energy for something like that, then I'm like, I either need to go to sleep or I need to like see the sun or
Hmm.
move my body
Yeah.
because something's just not working here. We got to press reset a little bit.
Yeah. That's one thing I do like about it is that with sewing, you are often moving around. So it
Hmm.
is something where you can use your hands, use your body,
Hmm.
and maybe not shut off your mind, but use it in a different way.
Yeah, totally. Well, let's get into the tips. We have so many good ones today. I'm going to kick us off with our first tip, which is to create a project menu that's organized by energy level. You guys, I love a menu of
Hmm.
sorts. This is one of the most helpful things that I've done for my sewing practice. I took my like long running list of projects that I wanted to make, and then I sorted them into three categories. The first category is high energy, then moderate focus, and then low energy. So, high energy projects are things like trying a new pattern or doing like major fit adjustments or tackling a technique that's really tricky or that I've never done before. Then moderate focus is something that maybe is a pattern that I've made before, but it's like a new fabric, or maybe I've hacked it. Something with several steps, but is not like overly complicated. Just
Right.
like a little bit of extra focus in there. Low energy projects are things like hemming, like construction, top stitching, making a pattern that I've sewn many times out of a tried and true fabric. When I walk into my sewing room, I can then like glance at my list and then immediately know what feels doable for me. It takes away the decision fatigue of starting everything and not knowing, or of staring at everything and not really knowing where to start. I used to get like paralyzed by this feeling when I would walk into my sewing space. The key here, I think, is just being really honest about what each project requires of me, like physically and mentally. And sometimes we underestimate how much mental energy something will actually take. Um, and I think that that's the real catch to this uh, trick is knowing yourself and like knowing, what takes more energy from you. Do you ever organize your projects this way, Sari?
I've never done it that way, except, a little bit in my mind. I know which ones are a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more low energy and which ones are more high energy. But I haven't made lists like that. And I like the idea of taking the individual tasks, the steps,
Mm-hmm.
and thinking about which ones are the high energy and which ones are the low energy ones.
Yeah, it's nice for it to be like a mix of like projects that are on like your radar, but also um alterations or steps or things like that, because you're not realistically going to go into your sewing room and start a new project every single time you step foot in there. But if you have a couple in progress projects, then that can help you to select which one is a better fit.
And sometimes you can, depending on the project, sometimes you can choose which step of the project you're going to do next.
Totally.
Depending on how it's laid out. So that's another great tip. All right, so the next one, which kind of builds on what Haley just said, is that I always try to have several different types of projects going at once. So I'll have one project that's really creative and experimental. Maybe I'm trying a new silhouette, or I'm just playing with pattern hacking or something like that. And then I'll have something that's more repetitive and more meditative, like hand quilting or making the same pattern for, the third time, something like that, something that's very mentally easy for me. And I always try to have at least one precision project, like something with tailoring or something with intricate details. I like trying out new details, maybe it's a pattern I've done before, but I'm working on adding something to it that I've never done before. So that way, no matter what my brain needs on any given day, I kind of have an option ready for me. So I think of it kind of like having different types of food in your kitchen. Sometimes you want comfort food and sometimes you want something that's exciting and new and you're willing to put in a little bit extra work to make something that's a little bit different. So I think your creative projects can work in the same way. Because I think the mistake that I used to make was working on only one project at a time all the time and thinking I always needed to finish it before I started something else, kind of my perfectionist tendencies coming out in that way. But that meant that if I wasn't in the mood for that particular project, I just wouldn't sew at all. It was kind of like a mental barrier. I'm sure we've all experienced this sometimes. You've got something, you're at a step in the project maybe where things are a little bit harder and you just can't get in the mood to do it. And then you kind of form this barrier in your mind that gets bigger and bigger the longer you avoid it. So having a way back into sewing when there is maybe a tough moment like that can be super, super helpful. So now I just give myself permission to have multiple things going, and it's made such a difference in how often I actually sew.
I think that can be like a real game changer, is having like that rotation of different kinds of projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And, they could be tissue box covers or something that's not a garment project. For me, that's very helpful.
That's like one of my number one tips for keeping the sojo.
Yeah.
Gotta have like little sprinkles in there.
Yeah.
Our next tip is to match technical difficulty with your mental bandwidth. This is so important and something that I really had to learn the hard way. I used to think that if I had time to sew, I should use it regardless of how I was feeling. So I would come home totally exhausted at the end of the day and try to do pattern adjustments or install an invisible zipper on tricky fabric. And without fail, I'd mess up, I'd get frustrated, and then I would not sew for a week or weeks.
Yeah.
And now I'm so much more strategic about when I tackle the challenging things. If I'm trying something new or tricky, or doing a complicated alteration, I wait for the morning or earlier in the day when I'm fresh, or maybe a weekend when I have a little bit more uninterrupted time. I just find that if I'm tired or distracted, it's much better to stick to things that I've done a million times, where my hands almost know what to do without my brain having to work too hard. Like when you're driving a route that you've driven 1,000 times, you black out. Well, I don't remember the drive.
Well, hopefully not black out
Not
completely.
black out, but you're it just...
Sometimes it feels that way.
You go on autopilot.
Yeah.
Don't worry, I'm not fully blacking out while I'm driving. So I think that this is really important, that it's not about never challenging yourself. It's about timing those challenges for when you're actually set up to succeed. I like to think of it as I wouldn't try to learn a new language at 11 p.m. after a stressful day. I think the same logic applies to sewing. it's just that sewing is like super fun. I'm not saying learning new languages isn't, but like but I think that we tend to like forget to apply like logic like this to things that we deem fun.
Yeah, that's funny because I am trying to learn a new language right now. It's really hard when you're tired.
Yes.
Your brain just does not want to cooperate.
Totally.
Yeah.
How do you decide when to tackle something that's like new versus sticking with the familiar?
That's a really great question because I love doing things that are new.
Mm-hmm.
I love new stuff and trying something new and challenging myself. But then when you get to when you're planning it, that all sounds great. But then in the moment, sometimes you just want something that's a little bit easier. So
yeah,
I do try to vary my projects, do something that's simpler, often something I've sewn before that I know how to do backwards and forwards, and try to vary that with the more difficult projects. So that's how I do it. But I think it is really important to have those, like you said, sprinkled in, those easier things, whether it's something that's for your house or a pillow or whatever, or it's just something you've made a lot of times before that feels easy to do.
Yeah.
Another one that I wanted to mention, so this is tip number 4, is using hand sewing as kind of a mood stabilizer. So it's kind of my go-to on difficult days sometimes. There's just something about the rhythm and the repetition of hand stitching that I find incredibly calming. So I always keep a little basket of hand sewing projects ready to go. So things like binding edges or hemming or adding buttons or even just mending. I have a little pile of mending that I always keep handy for those moments. Sometimes I'll even do embroidery or visible mending, just something that feels creative but doesn't require a lot of decision making. And the great thing about hand sewing is that it's portable. So I can do it on the couch, I can do it in bed, I can do it even outside on a nice day. And there's something about using my hands in that deliberate, slow way that helps me when I'm feeling really anxious or really overwhelmed. And if I'm worried about making mistakes on my machine, hand sewing often feels safer because you can always pull out a stitch if you need to. And it's also, you get a lot more control with hand stitching than you do when you're using a machine. And I just feel like it gives me that sense of accomplishment without the pressure, because maybe it's because you're working on something, a little small thing. And you get to accomplish that little small thing. So even if I only hem one skirt or I sew on 3 buttons, I can see tangible progress in a pretty short amount of time. And often after spending time with hand sewing, I find that my energy comes back and I'm ready to tackle something bigger. So it's kind of like a gateway back into creativity when I'm feeling stuck. And I think it's so important to have those.
I recently did a bunch of hand sewing on a jacket that I have been putting off for maybe a year and a half. And it felt so good.
Yeah. I don't know why we always put it off when it's easy. It's, a nice little quiet activity. You can
I know.
watch a movie or you can, listen to music or whatever.
Yeah, it's like it's a real like mental barrier for some reason. Then every time I do it, I'm like, why do I think I hate this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Our next tip is to identify your instant gratification projects. I think that we all need a quick win sometimes. For me, instant gratification projects are things that I can finish in an hour or two that give me that dopamine hit of completion, like a tissue. Like a tissue box cover.
If it works.
If it works. Maybe it's like a simple scarf or a drawstring bag or even like a t-shirt that I've made like half a dozen times before. The point is that it isn't the point isn't that it's groundbreaking or like really complicated. It's that it's like very satisfying. I like to keep the supplies for a few of these projects ready to go. So when I'm feeling discouraged or frustrated, like with a bigger project, I can pivot to something quick. I always have a good jersey for a t-shirt on hand. I always have some great scraps that I've been meaning to turn into little household projects.
Well, that's a great thing is that you can use your scraps for things like this, which is so satisfying to me.
I know, and I recently just organized my scraps, so I'm ready. For me, I think these projects are like hitting the reset button on my creative confidence, much like your hand sewing is for you. I finished something, like I made it, and now I can feel like capable of tackling something that I've been like struggling with or struggling to start before. So my message to you is to not judge yourself for needing these easier projects. I think that there's nothing wrong with making simple things. I consider myself an advanced sewer, and I make simple things all the time. And I think that it makes me a better sewer, and it helps me to refine my skills. And I think that having these kinds of things in your rotation makes you more sustainable as a sewer as well. You're not constantly like grinding through difficult projects until you burn out, which I think for our long-term success is really important.
Yeah. And it is really satisfying too. It's just it's really nice. And plus, I think with these little easy projects, these simple projects are often things that you can use every day. And that is also really satisfying because it's fun to see the things and use the things that you've made on a daily basis. Whereas with garments, it might sit in your closet. You might wear it once a month. You know, my favorite things, maybe I'll wear once a week. But with, you know, a tissue box holder, I see it every day.
Every day, multiple times a day.
Yeah.
I got to finish that project. What's your go-to quick project these days?
Well, so over the course of last year, I worked on a quilt where I did a different block. I was just showing you pictures of it that I finished. And I did a different block every month for the year and then put them all together into a sampler quilt at the end of the year. And making those blocks was so fun. So any patchwork project to me is really satisfying, and it engrosses my brain in a different way because I get to play with fabric and like put together little combinations of scrap fabric. It feels really low stakes because I'm using scraps. I'm not using anything I bought specifically for the project. And then I make things like maybe a little makeup bag, or that's another thing I use every day is a little patchwork makeup bag that I made, and or a pillow or whatever it is. So anything patchwork with scraps is one of my favorite things. I was actually just, when I pulled out my my purse just now and I was putting away my sunglasses when I got here to the studio, I was thinking I really need to make a sunglass case. I think that's going to be next on my project list because I have this one that I have like these cheapo sunglasses I got for camping, and I just use the little drawstring bag that came with it for all of my sunglasses, and it's so ugly. It's really ugly.
I have one like that in my purse right now, and it is like, I like yellow. This is the worst shade of yellow imaginable, and I really need to make a new one. And I could probably make it in a half an hour.
Yeah, tops. I could probably make 5 of them in half an hour. So yeah, things like that are just, to me, anything I can use every day and anything with patchwork is super satisfying. What about you?
I love a zippered pouch or like a tote bag. I love a scrunchie. I'm always making scrunchies for me and my girls. Just like if I have like a little leftover scrap, I'll whip one together. I've also been really into doing some like creative mending on their leggings lately. Collectively, they probably have like 25 pairs of leggings, and they seem to always have holes in the knees. And so it's like a little heart patch, or like, you know, finding like cute little whimsical ways to mend them is my new sewing hyperfixation.
Oh, that's fun. That would be a fun thing to do on your own clothing too, jeans or whatever.
Totally.
I like that idea. That would be fun. I have some old jeans I was thinking about getting rid of, but maybe it'd be fun to maybe turn them into shorts in the summer and then add some cute little patches and things to them.
Whimsical mending.
Yes, whimsical mending. All right, so the next one is noticing which fabrics call to you. So this might sound a little bit weird, but I've found that paying attention to which fabrics I'm drawn to on any given day tells me something about what I need emotionally. So sometimes I'll walk into my sewing room and I feel like pulling out my soft, cozy fabrics, like flannel or double gauze or brushed cotton. And other times I'm drawn to something with more structure, like denim or canvas. And sometimes I want bright colors, or I want neutrals, or I want a really interesting print. And I used to ignore all these impulses and just work on whatever project was next on my list. But now I let myself follow those tactile and visual preferences because they're often reflecting what I emotionally need at that moment. So if I'm craving soft fabrics, maybe I need comfort and gentleness. And if I'm drawn to structure, maybe I need something that feels more grounding and solid. It's a small thing, but just honoring these instincts makes sewing feel more nourishing. And honestly, I think the projects I make when I'm listening to what I'm drawn to end up being the things that I wear more and that I love more because they're coming from a genuine place rather than just checking something off a list. So that's something that I'm trying to do more and more.
I like that. It's a little woo, but
It is
like,
a little bit,
I
yeah.
like it.
Yeah. It's great, especially for those small projects.
Uh-huh.
Those little projects that are a little bit more low stakes. Because I do love planning out my sewing projects and having everything kind of, put a lot of thought into what I'm going to make. But for those little in-betweeners, it's nice to just do what you feel like doing in the moment.
Yeah, a little more intuitive approach.
Yeah.
All right, so this next tip is to create a bad mood project category. So this might sound kind of counterintuitive, but stick with me. I have a whole category of projects that I would just call like my bad mood projects. So these are things where mistakes genuinely do not matter. I like to think of like wearable muslin projects or like maybe like some low stakes mending or experimental makes where I'm just like trying something out. These are great, in my opinion, bad mood projects because the beauty in them is that it takes like all of the pressure off. If I'm having one of those days where I'm feeling really perfectionistic or self-critical, I can work on something where there's literally like no way to fail because the whole point is experimentation and not perfection. I might use these projects to try and like sneak in a new seam finish I've been curious about, or test out a fabric that I'm just not quite sure about. Or sometimes I'll make something intentionally just like scrappy and weird just to remind myself that sewing is supposed to be fun. These projects give me kind of the permission to be messy and make mistakes, which is actually really freeing. And you know what? Sometimes my bad mood projects end up being like favorites of mine because I was like not overthinking every single decision. I was just making and creating, which is like what sewing's really about.
Yeah, I love that. I have a list of things on my desk, a little small, I wrote it on a to-do list pad that's just things that make me feel better when I'm not feeling great. So if I ever feel down, these are the things I can do, things like going for a walk or, the typical things. But I love the idea of doing that for sewing too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really great idea. The next tip is to schedule challenging projects strategically. So I've learned that I'm much more patient and focused in the morning, especially on weekends. So now if I have a project that really requires precision, like setting in sleeves or installing a collar or doing top stitching, I try to schedule it for a Saturday or a Sunday morning, if at all possible. So I'll make myself a cup of coffee, I'll put on some music, and I'll just tackle the challenging part when my brain is really fresh. And the afternoons are better for things that don't require as much precision, like cutting out patterns or organizing my space. And then evenings are really best for those more meditative, low energy projects we talked about earlier. I think a lot of us try to force ourselves to sew whenever we have free time without considering whether it's actually the right time for what we're trying to do. But if you can align the type of sewing with your natural energy rhythms, then everything gets easier. I think this is true for like any creative activity. If you can align the level of energy with your current energy level, it's going to be so much easier. It's going to take less time. It's going to be less frustrating. Now, I know not everyone has the luxury of choosing when they sew. If evenings are your only option, I think that's totally fine. The point is just to notice when you tend to have more patience and focus and try to save the trickiest parts of your projects for those times. So even if it means breaking a project into smaller chunks and spreading it across multiple sewing sessions, sometimes that works best. So just thinking about your energy level at different times of day can be so helpful.
Yeah, that's how I schedule my work days as well.
Me too. Yeah, absolutely. I always do my writing first thing in the morning before anybody else has even talked to me. So that's what works for me, and it's the same with sewing. It's the same with anything creative, I think.
Totally. I that's why I love an afternoon meeting, because I'm like, okay, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I've used all my creative energy up, and now I can be social and do the other things.
Yeah.
All right. So my next tip is to give yourself permission to switch projects midstream. This was a really hard one for me to learn because I'm very much a finisher. Even like with books, I was always like someone who had to finish the book.
I know. I just gave up on a book midway through, and I was reading it and I was like, I don't really like this book. And then Ken was like, you don't have to finish it.
Yes, I do, Ken. Yes, I do. I finally have gotten to a point with books where I will allow myself to start another book, but I still have to, like, it is so rare for me to not finish a book.
Yeah.
But I've gotten much better at it with sewing. I used to think that starting a new project before finishing the current one was like some kind of failure, as if I was like being flaky or undisciplined or something. But I realized that switching projects when I'm not feeling it is actually the opposite of giving up. It's listening to like what I need and keeping my sewing enjoyable. And if I'm in the middle of making a tailored jacket and I'm just like not feeling it anymore, forcing myself to finish it isn't going to make me love the jacket anymore. It's going to make me resent sewing. So now I give myself full permission to set a project aside and work on something else. And you know what? I almost always come back to the original project later when I'm like in more of the correct headspace for it. And then I finish it with enthusiasm instead of like obligation. The goal for me isn't to finish every single project that I start in order. The goal is to enjoy the process of sewing. And so that's what I try to remind myself of. And if switching projects helps me to do that, then it's actually like what I should do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that would be a good lesson for me to learn. I have a hard time abandoning things midway through. And the last tip is to check in with yourself before starting. So this is the simplest tip, but it's maybe the most important. So before I start sewing, I try to take about 30 seconds to just check in with myself. And I ask, do I want to problem solve today? Do I want to just create freely? Or do I just want to zone out and let my hands do something familiar? And that quick mental scan helps me to choose the right project for how I'm actually feeling rather than just defaulting to whatever's on top of the pile. And it sounds so basic, but I think we skip this step a lot. And we think we should just be productive and get to work without pausing to notice what we actually need. But that 30-second pause can be the difference between a really frustrating sewing session and a really satisfying one. And over a time, you just get better at reading yourself. You start to recognize patterns like, oh, I'm craving hand sewing, which means I'm probably feeling anxious about something. Or I want to work on something challenging, which means I'm feeling energized and confident today. So that self-awareness makes you a better sewist because you're working with yourself instead of against yourself. And ultimately, that's what makes sewing sustainable as a long-term creative practice. All right, that was a lot. We had a lot of great tips and a really cool discussion, I think. So let's recap what we talked about today. We covered creating a project menu organized by energy level, keeping a variety of project types in rotation, and matching technical difficulty to your mental bandwidth. We talked about using hand sewing as a mood stabilizer, identifying your instant gratification projects, and noticing which fabrics call to you. We discussed creating a bad mood project category, scheduling challenging projects strategically, and giving yourself permission to switch projects midstream. And finally, we talked about checking in with yourself before you start sewing. So my big takeaway from this conversation is that sewing doesn't have to be one size fits all. You don't have to approach every project with the same energy or the same mindset. And in fact, I think one of the most important skills we can develop as sewists is learning to read ourselves and choose projects that serve us in the moment. And that's what makes sewing feel really easy instead of like another obligation on your to-do list, which I think is a huge danger with any creative hobby.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really helpful way to think about it. What about you? What's your big takeaway?
I think my big takeaway is similar and kind of like building on that. For some reason, I think it's really easy for us with sewing because it's an enjoyable hobby, because it's a creative pursuit, to not apply some of the same logic to it that we would apply to other parts of our lives. Like if, for instance, if I was having, like I knew I had a really busy, hectic week, I would like not plan to make dinners every night that took me an hour and a half to cook. Like that same logic applies to planning my sewing. Just because I enjoy it doesn't mean that my like real life constraints do not apply, that my like mental and emotional constraints do not apply. And so I think that bringing some of that like everyday problem solving that we bring to other aspects of our life to sewing can help it just to be a more sustainable practice.
I love that analogy because I love cooking, but at the same time, like you, I have to be strategic about it. I can't cook something special and different every single night. I just don't have the time for that. So yeah, I think that's a really helpful analogy. And speaking of matching projects to your mood, if you're looking for a quick and easy project for those low energy days, I want to tell you about our free Hansi woven tee pattern. So Hansi is a simple, loose fit t-shirt designed specifically for woven fabrics. And it's the kind of project that's perfect when you just want something that's straightforward and satisfying. So no complicated techniques, no fussy fitting. And it's a great stash buster that you can make in so many different ways. So you can try it in a soft chambray for something casual, or you could make it in a beautiful rayon challis for a dressier version. And the best part is that it takes only an hour or two to sew. So it's one of those instant gratification projects that we were just talking about. And you can get the Hansi pattern completely free at seamwork.com and then just go to our catalog and look for Hansi. It's the Hansi Easy Woven T-shirt, and we'll also put a link to it in the show notes. And honestly, I think just having a pattern like this in your back pocket is so valuable for those days when you just need a quick and easy win. I'm about to make one myself in a really pretty rayon velvet. It's going to be, I know, I planned this out before the holidays, but I then I was going to make it for the holidays, but now it's later. But anyway, I'm making a video about it and it's going to be on our YouTube channel probably by the time this comes out or around the time this podcast comes out. So if you want to check that out, I'm going to be trying to make it in an hour and seeing if I can do it in an hour. So let's see. Let's see if it's really a 1 hour project. But you can make it in so many different fabrics, which is why I love this one. And if you liked this episode, please leave us a review. You can also follow us on YouTube at Seamwork Video. Definitely give us a follow there because we've done so many great videos lately and there's more coming out every single week. You can also follow us on Instagram at Seamwork. And if you'd like to become part of the Seamwork community, head over to seamwork.com to learn how to join our wonderful community. And that's it for us today. I'm Sari.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio.